Hey guys, today we're going to be taking a look at another PCC, and this time it's going to be Sig Sauer and their MPX K, which is their main PCC on the market currently, and really draws a lot from the AR-15, especially when it comes to the controls and overall ergonomics. This is going to be very familiar to most American shooters. The MPX is actually a fairly new submachine gun, all things considered, and the development of it goes back to 2012. So at that point, different gun companies were starting to introduce more PCCs, or pistol caliber carbines, to the market, and Sig wanted to get in on that game, and this was their entrant. However, it is fairly different compared to most other PCCs in the world. The majority of them are going to be some type of blowback system, so a straight blowback like the B&T APC-9, or a delayed blowback system like with the SP9A3 from Grand Power or the MP5. Now, Sig went a different direction, and they actually use a short stroke gas piston system with a rotating bolt, and this is very similar to some of the other more modern designs. So the Sig MCX was actually eventually developed off of the MPX. The MPX came first, and then it was essentially upsized to 5.56 and 300 blackout, and that's where we got the MCX. The MPX was originally introduced back at SHOT Show in 2013, and some of the big claims to fame for it were going to be the controls and ergonomics, which are almost identical to a standard AR-15, so it's going to be very familiar to most civilian shooters, as well as different police units and military units. There's not going to be a big change in training going from an AR-15 platform to the MPX. So it is a closed rotating bolt 9mm PCC or submachine gun that utilizes that short stroke gas piston system. Another of the big features of the MPX that was really heralded off of its release was the modularity of the platform, and they really wanted this to be kind of a future-proof concept. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the ability to swap the barrel out to different lengths. So coming out the gate, you had a 4.5, a 6.5, an 8-inch barrel, and then eventually a 16-inch carbine. So you could swap that out very easily compared to most other submachine guns. And the MPX was also one of the front runners for the original Picatinny style of stock attachment, which has become incredibly popular today. So that's where that really started off. And then there's also a lot of compatibility with AR-15 style parts. So you have pistol grips, safety selectors, as well as different trigger groups will generally work in these. The MPX was originally released to the US market in around April 2015, and they came out with a couple of different variants. However, one of the most interesting concepts they had was the MPX C, which actually utilized what is essentially the core of a suppressor, a baffle stack, as the muzzle device for a shorter barrel. And the idea was that the end user would eventually be able to buy a serialized tube, which they could put over that muzzle device, and it would become an integrally suppressed PCC. Now, the ATF took issue with that very early on and classified that muzzle device as a suppressor. So there were some legal arguments back and forth on that for a little while, but eventually that ruling ended up sticking on it. So that never saw the light of day in the US market. Outside of the civilian market, the MPX has gotten a couple of users in the military as well as in police team markets. And on the military side, it's generally going to be special forces teams. As far as I'm aware, there isn't a country that has adopted this as a standard issue, common issue PCC or submachine gun. But on special forces teams where they need something compact and in 9mm, these are actually fairly popular. Not going to be as popular as some other models out there, but they are there. On police side, there are SWAT teams in the US that have adopted the MPX to a degree, but again, you're not going to see it as much as you're going to see, say, a 5.56 or 300 blackout carbine at this point. The MPX is actually surprisingly popular in Asia. There's a couple of countries that have adopted it. You have Indonesia with their Detachment 88, as well as the Air Force Special Operations Forces, Malaysia's Army Special Service Regiment. You have Taiwan with the ROK Army and Marine Special Units, as well as Thailand, the Royal Thai Police Special Operations Elements, as well as Hong Kong with the Police Counter-Terror and Railway Response Units. Now, in Europe, it's going to be quite a bit less popular. We just have Switzerland and their municipal police tactical teams, as well as Trinidad and Tobago. They have their special branch and tactical police units using the MPX to a degree. These have also popped up in fairly small numbers in Ukraine as well, so there's going to be a couple of pictures out there of that. In 2018, Sig started to focus a little bit more on the competition market for the MPX, and that's where you get the carbine, as well as longer handguards, stuff like that. The Timney trigger that these now all come with was introduced. So that was very popular starting around then with a bunch of competition shooters. These are very, very good competition PCCs. In 2019, Sig released the MPX Copperhead, which is the ultra compact version of the MPX, so it uses the same operating system. However, it uses a 3.5-inch barrel, which is absolutely tiny. Really weird design that they went with a crown type muzzle on it that is actually integrated into the barrel, so people would have to remove the barrel, send it out to get cut for threads to suppress one of those. But those are very small, and they're actually generally a little bit less expensive than the full-size MPX. And in around 2019 or 2020, Sig released what is generally known as the Gen 2 of the MPX series. And some of the big updates with that was changing from a key mod handguard to the M-Lock, since key mod was really starting to go out of style at that point. And then also having that Timney trigger in there. Now, Sig has a very bad reputation for making intergenerational updates without actually having a new generation. Another thing they changed on it was the gas plug. The original one wasn't ported, so if you got water into the gas system, it would cause it to malfunction and it wouldn't function correctly. So they did drill a port in there for the second generation, but again, they didn't really call it a second generation. Another issue there was they released a new magazine design. So you have your Gen 1 magazines as well as the Gen 2 ones. This one uses a Gen 2 magazines, and they're not necessarily interchangeable. And that's really all we have to cover for the history of the MPX, and there's really not that much to go over with it. So let's go ahead and jump into the review. And real quick, I want to give a big shout out to the Echo Valley Training Center in Cape on Hill, West Virginia, where I did testing with this guy and a bunch of competitions over the years. So if you're in the DC area, please check them out. And then also please check out my Patreon if you'd like to. I'd really appreciate a little bit of help paying for ammo, but you really don't need to if you don't want to. First up, we have accuracy, where the MPX is going to get a 1, and at 25 yards using 147 grain Lawman ammunition, I was only able to get a 6.6 MOA group out of this thing. Now, the MPX actually has a pretty sordid history when it comes to accuracy, and a lot of people have reported accuracy issues with theirs. Some of them are very accurate. Mine happens to be one that is not particularly accurate, and some of the reasons for that might be the muzzle device. So I do have a 3-lug muzzle device from Silencer Co. on here, which is butted up against a taper adapter for the barrel. Now that's some place that can cause some issues. So Sig really likes their taper. Sig really likes their tapered barrel systems for muzzle devices, which are a bit of a pain, to be honest. Like, I wish they would just have the regular 90-degree shoulder on there. But mine, I've actually taken it off and remounted it a couple of times to see if I could get different results on the accuracy, but I consistently get pretty bad groups with this thing. Next up, we have Aftermarket, where I'm going to give the MPX a 4. And really, first starting off, there's quite a bit of different parts from AR-15s that you can use in the MPX. So your trigger group is technically AR-15 compatible. Now, there are some concerns there because with 9mm PCCs, even with the MPX, you're generally going to get a lot faster bolt movement than you would on a typical AR-15. So it's really hitting that hammer hard and potentially damaging your disconnector on a PCC style carbine. So with the MPX, you're generally better off going with like the Timney trigger, where it's specifically designed to be able to counteract that faster hammer speed. Now, it also uses standard AR-15 safety selectors, so there are a ton of different options like the Radian that I have on my gun here. And then I'm not going to get too deep into the stock side of things. This comes from the factory with a Picatinny style rail adapter on the back, so there are an insane amount of different stock options from PMM, Strike Industries. Sig even has multiple different styles of stock. You have this folding collapsing stock, which is my personal favorite. They also have a retractable style of stock straight from Sig as well. Those are a bit heavy, but if you want a short package, that's a good way to go. And then they also make a minimalist aluminum style of stock, which is also side folding if you want the lightest possible package. Now, the charging handle on the MPX is proprietary. It's not compatible with either the AR-15 or the larger MCX, and you do have a couple aftermarket options. First one's going to be Radian, so they make a Raptor charging handle for the MPX, and then Next Level Armament also makes an upgraded charging handle. The original Sig one's not bad, but it is fairly small as far as the levers go, so those can be a pretty big upgrade. As far as handguards go, there's actually not that many different options, despite how easy these are to swap out. So you have Midwest Industries, they make a couple of different ones, including suppressor width handguards. If you want to sink a can underneath or make it an integrally suppressed MPX, you do have options there. As well as Lancer Systems makes a carbon fiber MPX handguard with M-LOK on it, so those are your main options for the handguards. The coolest thing about the MPX is being able to swap the barrel very, very easily by just taking out 2 screws, essentially. And In Lead We Trust is going to be the biggest name in aftermarket barrels for the MPX. They make multiple different lengths, so you have your 4.5 inch like on the MPX K here, as well as 6.5, 8 inch carbine length barrels. And the cool thing is those have an adjustable gas plug on them, so you can really tune your gas system. The original just has a single position for that. And the coolest option from In Lead We Trust, in my opinion, is they do make an integrally suppressed barrel with ports in it. So you can use an MP5 SD style can and have an integrally suppressed MPX. When it comes to magazines, the MPX does use a proprietary magazine, and there's technically 2 different generations of these original translucent polymer magazines. The first ones are going to be for your Gen 1 MPXs, and then like the Gen 2-ish and newer ones are going to use the Gen 2 magazines, which are some slight differences there. But currently, the Sig MPX is shipping with a magazine made by Thrill, and that's just a solid polymer magazine, and the good thing about that is significantly cheaper than the original MPX translucent magazines, which these are fantastic magazines. Story is that they are actually made by Lancer, and they have always made fairly good magazines. These definitely look like Lancer magazines. They have the steel inserts for the feed lips as well as a magazine catch on it. But the problem with them is they were ridiculously expensive. These are like $60 a magazine for the original Lancer made ones. So that was way too high of a price. And I think this could have been the new standard for PCC magazines if they hadn't put such an insane price on it. The Thrill magazines are going to be significantly cheaper. You can get them for around like $35 to $40, so that's going to be a lot less. I don't have any of those, but I've heard they're actually pretty reliable. So if you're going to get a new one, I would suggest just going with those magazines. Next up, we have durability, where I'm going to give the MPX a full 5, and these do have a pretty good reputation of being able to hold up to wear. The receivers are made out of aluminum, and it feels very high quality and well made, so I have really no complaints there. And then the finish on it is going to be anodizing, and it seems to be a very well-made finish. Mine shows almost no wear on it, so it's holding up very well. And the steel components are also well made on my particular gun. I haven't seen any issues with it. The wear all seems really good, and these don't generally have a reputation of breaking parts on them. It is possible, but on my gun, it's been entirely reliable without any major parts issues. Next up, we have Ergonomics, where I'm going to give the MPX a 4. So starting with controls, again, this is going to be a short stroke gas piston system gun, and there is a gas regulator or gas plug underneath the handguard. It is hard to get to and not adjustable on the fly, so you really don't need to worry about that. But on the MPX K, it is fairly short up here, so just make sure you don't get your hand out there too far. But overall, that's pretty comfortable up there. Now, moving back to the controls, on the left side, we have a standard AR-15 style bolt catch, bolt release, so that's really easy to get to. Doesn't really cause any issues there. So again, these use a standard AR-15 style of charging handle. This again is a proprietary charging handle by itself though. So we can just lock that guy back. We have our bolt catch, bolt release here. Very easy to use. We have an ambidextrous magazine release on the left side, so that is also easy to use. And one really nice thing about the MPX, it has a gigantic flared magwell, so for competition circles, that is very easy to get your magazine seated in there very quickly, so that is a really nice design feature there. Now, coming back to the other side, you can see we do have a dust cover, which is nice, so you're not going to end up getting any dirt or anything in there. You can close it up like an AR-15, so it is a very well sealed system. And then on the right side, you can see we do have a bolt release, so if I lock it back again, this is just a button style. Generally, I don't like these. I prefer something where you can lock it back from the right side as well, but this is just a release. Your magazine release on the right side is standard AR-15, so really nothing crazy there. And then your safety selector, again, is going to be interchangeable with AR-15 style ones, and the original ones are going to be 90-degree safety selectors. These AXTS ones are just their standard 4590 ones, so this is a nice upgrade. And then just from there, we have our stock, and again, this is the retractable style of stock from Sig. It's very slim and it does fold to the side. You can just lift it up. It's FAL style here. It'll fold over. It doesn't lock, so it's just tension holding it closed. But it does have a good amount of tension, so it's not going to just flop out. And to flip this out, you just got to pull on it. Comes back out, and that's really all we have for ergonomics. And next up we have maintenance, where I'm going to give the MPX a 4. Now as far as disassembly goes, for the most part it's going to be very AR-15-ish. So you have the 2 push pins on the lower receiver, so you can just pop that off and get inside there and clean everything up. And then your bolt carrier as well as the charging handle comes out essentially like an AR-15. Now of course, since this has a folding stock and no buffer tube, your springs are going to be inside of the receiver on 2 rods. And those can be a bit tricky because you do need to remove the springs from the rods and the rods from the bolt carrier to be able to disassemble your bolt. And that's a little bit tricky the first couple of times you do it, but once you get used to it, it's not bad at all. At that point, you can just pull out your cam pin and then your 4-lug rotating bolt and just get in there and clean everything up. Your handguard actually comes out incredibly easily. You just have to pop the front pivot pin out and it will just slide right off the end of the receiver, which exposes your barrel as well as the 2 screws that hold in your barrel. You can just take those screws out all the way so they aren't retained in the receiver. A plate falls out of the left side and you can pull the entire barrel out the front of the PCC. Your barrel then disassembles into the gas plug as well as the piston. And that can be a bit tricky to do depending on how much you've been shooting it and how carboned up it is. It can be kind of difficult to rotate your gas plug to where it can be disassembled, and then getting your piston out if it's carboned up is a bit of a pain as well, but as long as you got a punch and some sort of a hammer, it's really not too bad. My biggest complaint for the MPX is going to be the shape of the upper receiver itself. So there are a lot of little nooks and crannies in there, and it's very, very thin on the inside of the upper receiver, so you really can't get your finger in there. You're going to need some sort of a longer brush to get into those recesses and clean it out, because this gun is fairly dirty, all things considered, so you'll definitely want to clean it. But that's going to be my biggest complaint about actually maintaining this gun. Now, when it comes to parts, most of your parts are actually going to be fairly available. Sig generally has them on their website, or there's Midwest Gunworks are going to have factory parts for these. They can be a bit on the pricey side, but they are generally available. So if anything breaks on it, you should be able to fix it. And then again, certain parts are going to be compatible with the AR-15, so you have a lot of different replacement options there. Next up is going to be modularity, and I'm going to give the MPX a full 5, and I would argue it's probably the most modular PCC on the US market at this point, because it has that Picatinny slot at the end of the receiver, so you can throw a ton of different stocks on there. Has that AR-15 compatibility with grips as well as certain trigger groups on it. And then the handguard is incredibly easy to take off and change out as well. And the biggest part is going to be being able to pull the barrel and swap it for different lengths as well as an integrally suppressed barrel. So overall, this is a very, very modular PCC. When it comes to price, I'm going to give the MPX K a 3. Generally, the pistol versions of these come in at around $1,900 to $2,000, so they're definitely not the cheapest PCC out there. They are fairly expensive, but there are more expensive ones from like B&T, but these are really going to be closer to your high-tier version of submachine guns or PCCs. The magazines are going to be fairly expensive as well, depending on which ones you go with, so there is quite a bit of cost associated with this platform. When it comes to shooting characteristics, I'm going to give the MPX K a full 5, and this is an incredibly nice shooting little PCC. Starting out with the trigger, this does come from the factory, or at least the newer ones do, with a Timney trigger, which is a very nice single-stage trigger, I believe, and it does have that flat face to it if you're a flat face enjoyer, and it is fairly light, coming in at around 4 pounds 6 ounces. So from the factory, this is one of the nicest PCC triggers on the market. Recoil impulse, though, is really where I love the MPX because this is the only PCC I've tested so far that competes with the full-size MP5. These have a very nice, light, controllable recoil impulse due to that short-stroke gas piston system, and I think that you could even tune it a little bit better if you get one of the inlet we truss barrels with the adjustable gas piston or gas plug on them. So these are incredibly nice when it comes to shooting and having that recoil impulse, which is why they're so popular on the competition market. Now, as far as suppressing the MPX goes, I did suppress this with both my rugged Obsidian 45, which is my full back pressure can, as well as my B&T TP9 RBS can, which is a lower back pressure kind of flow through can. With the rugged Obsidian on there, the full back pressure can, this is a gassy gun. And that's going to be due to the charging handle more than anything else, I think, because again, this does draw from the AR-15 quite a bit. And the biggest problem with suppressing an AR-15 is the gas coming out of the back end of the charging handle slot. You do get a similar effect with this, so you are going to get a fair amount of gas to the face with this system. Now with that TP9 can, the lower back pressure one, it is a lot better. I'm not getting nearly as much gas to the face, so that does solve that issue a little bit more, but there are some slightly better suppressor hosts out there. When it comes to reliability, I'm going to give the MPX a full 5, and through all the rounds I put through this thing, I've never had an issue with it, never had a malfunction. It's been entirely reliable. The magazines are reliable. It is a very good, reliable system. When it comes to weight, I'm going to give the MPX K a 4 as it weighs in at about 5.3 pounds, which is fairly lightweight. Again, it is a K style of gun, so with that shorter barrel, it's going to weigh less, and it's fairly competitive with some other K guns out there, but it's not the lightest. And when we go ahead and add up all 10 categories for the Sig Sauer MPX K, we come out with a score of 40, which puts it high up into the A tier. Overall, this is one of my favorite PCCs, and as far as modern ones go, this is probably near the top of my list. And it does have quite a bit going for it. The aftermarket's not bad, particularly because it has a lot of compatibility with the AR-15, as well as that Picatinny style adapter on the rear of the receiver. The ergonomics are going to be very familiar to anyone who's used an AR-15. It's a very durable PCC as well that I haven't had any issues with. And it is probably the most modular PCC on the market at this point. And the shooting characteristics are fantastic and actually competes pretty well with the full-size MP5. Now, by far the biggest problem that I've had with my MPX is going to be the accuracy. While this thing isn't necessarily minute a barn, it is definitely shooting a little bit rougher than pretty much all my other PCCs. I can still hit a man-sized target out at 100 yards, but those groups are pretty open compared to a lot of the other ones. And then also the price on the MPX is going to be quite a bit higher than a lot of your other options. And finally, when it comes to the cool tier, I'm going to throw the MPX K up into the A tier. And overall, I do think it is a very attractive looking PCC. As far as AR9 style PCCs, which I would generally lump this in with, I think it is one of the best looking ones out there. The MPX has popped up in a couple of different movies, but honestly not a ton. So starting out, we had Logan, it popped up in there. The Equalizer 2, Denzel Washington did use a kind of tricked out MPX, and then the most tricked out one is going to be the Terran Tactical one that was in John Wick Chapter 3. That was probably the biggest movie appearance of an MPX. It also popped up in Bad Boys for Life, as well as Ballerina, the newest John Wick movie. There have been a fair amount of video game appearances for the MPX, so starting out with the Call of Duty series, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, as well as Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the newer one from 2022. Those both have MPXs. Then there's also the Battlefield series, starting with Battlefield 4 and Battlefield Hardline. And then the new upcoming Battlefield 6 game is also going to be featuring an MPX. Escape from Tarkov also has an MPX, as well as Rainbow Six Siege. It's also popped up in Ready or Not more recently as well. Alright guys, and that's going to do it for my review of the Sig Sauer MPX K. So thank you for checking out the video. Please like, share, subscribe. All that's going to help me out and get the channel to grow. So if you could help me out there, I really appreciate it. But I will see you in the next video.